Stephen Beardsley in Berlin. Here's a look at our top stories. A milestone for Germany as liquefied natural gas flows for the first time through an LNG terminal. We'll look at what it means for the energy crisis. Russia opens a new gas field as part of its pivot to China. But can it really replace the energy trade volumes it enjoyed with Europe? Also on our show, the destruction in Ukraine is growing and the price tag for reconstruction rising. We'll speak with the head of Europe's Reconstruction Bank about the plan to rebuild. Welcome to the show. A small milestone in Germany today as the first flows of liquefied natural gas have entered the country's gas network. It's happening via a new LNG terminal, the country's first, and courtesy of this ship, the Höhe Esperanza. Lovely name. It's all happening here in Wilhelmshaven on Germany's North Sea coast. And that's where the ship, the central part of the terminal, will convert the delivered LNG back to its gaseous state. And the floating terminal in Wilhelmshaven is connected to the natural gas network in Germany via a 26-kilometer pipeline. And the pipeline costs around 150 million euros and can deliver around 6% of Germany's natural gas supply needed in a year. Right now, it's just in test phase. Full operation is expected in January. Let's learn more about this with Michael Sterner. He's professor for energy storage and energy systems at the Technical University OTH Regensburg. Michael, great to have you on the show. First flows, we've had multiple milestones with this terminal. The fact it was completed. Now we have a ship that's there, and now we have the first flows going in. Give us some sense of how important this actually is for where we are in this crisis.
It's definitely very meaningful to Germany as we really struggle to get more independent from Russian energy imports. So that's definitely a milestone, and I'm really happy that it happened that fast. But yeah, that's bridging us for some years, but it's not the final solution, definitely.
It also, there's also going to be issues getting gas on the open markets, I imagine. This doesn't necessarily solve that, does it? The price of gas, as we've seen, can be very erratic.
Yeah, that's definitely the case because the competition is quite high on gas and gas supply. And so this gives us an opportunity to have more access to liquid natural gas markets, which we didn't have so far because we were so reluctant on this toxic cheap energy from Russia. But it's really... So from the environmental point of view, it's not the best case. But in terms of economy, of course, we need this independency and supply security. That's why it's an important step for Germany.
You mentioned the environmental aspect. Natural gas has always been part of the plan to move to renewables. It was supposed to be a bridging fuel. Does the construction of all of these LNG terminals, there are multiple that are going to be constructed, some are almost done right now, does this make that transition more difficult because it creates this kind of, obviously, a terminal for gas, or does it make it easier because some of this infrastructure can be used for hydrogen, from what I understand?
Well, we wouldn't have phased out of fossil energy from Russia that fast without this war. So definitely it was in the plan to phase out, but not that fast. So it's just substituting here fossil energy. But of course, we have to have the frameworks like the emission trading system in Europe, which has just been extended to heating systems and also transport. And it's a bridge. But I'm not in favor of making contracts with Qatar starting in 26, lasting for 15 years. This is really contrary to our climate goals. But you're right, definitely. We can use some of that infrastructure to import renewable energy, so in form of ammonia, where we have 150 Habers worldwide, many ships. But it's not fitting for green hydrogen. It would fit for green LNG. You can do green LNG via power to gas, and that's competitive and technically and economically feasible compared to LNG imports from Qatar. So we should definitely look and create new energy partnerships which have our values, which really can import then green energy in whatever form, but mainly molecules, LNG, in LNG. So it's definitely doable, and there should be the focus.
I want to break in. I'm sorry. I want to break in. I want to ask you, before we run out of time, the approval process and the construction of this, it lasted only 10 months. That's light speed by German regulatory standards. It's often been said that it would be nice to have this for renewable approvals, for wind turbines, for solar cells. Does this set a precedent? Briefly, if you can.
No, it doesn't. We have this in vaccinations. We saw many light speeds, but not in energy transition. We definitely need this for climate action to accelerate wind and solar and so on. And if you compare it to Corona, the money we spent for Corona would definitely last to have a complete transition towards climate neutrality worldwide. So that's the good news. It's feasible and it's doable, but we need acceleration from the permission side, definitely, especially for wind.
Michael Stern, professor at the Technical University OTH Regensburg. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Russia has also been looking for alternatives since the beginning of the war. To that end, President Vladimir Putin has inaugurated a new natural gas field in eastern Siberia that will serve exports to China. But there, too, a significant amount of infrastructure has yet to be constructed.
Moscow wants to boost gas sales to China. Gas income is critical to the Kremlin to bankroll Putin's war against Ukraine. But until now, Russia has had very little infrastructure to pump gas eastwards. Now Putin has announced the development of what he said would become the largest gas field in eastern Siberia, plus the infrastructure to export the gas. The implementation of projects such as the Kovykta field, the Power of Siberia 2, the Far Eastern route will make it possible to increase gas supplies to the east to 48 billion cubic meters by 2025 and 88 billion by 2030. But that's still not even close to what the West was buying from Russia before the war. Putin claims the new gas field in the Irkutsk region has recoverable reserves of 1.8 trillion cubic meters. That would make it around the 15th biggest in the world. The head of Gazprom, Alexei Miller, says that the Kovykta field is ready for operation and would soon begin pumping gas eastwards. Russia is desperate to get the project online as quickly as possible to replenish dwindling war coffers. But the projected timeline to build the infrastructure shows that regardless of the outcome of the war, the Kremlin expects Russia will be cut off from Western markets for a long time to come.
Earlier this week, the International Monetary Fund approved a special monitoring program for Ukraine to help it attract more international donors. The country faces a funding gap of up to 57 billion euros just in 2023. It's racing to fix energy infrastructure like power grids and generators that have been targeted in recent months. Then there's the longer-term challenge of reconstruction. Earlier this year, the government in Kyiv put the cost to rebuild at a massive $750 billion. Let's talk a bit more about this with Matteo Patrone with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. He's managing director for Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. Matteo, thank you for joining us. $250 billion is a hefty sum, especially when the Ukraine is going door to door begging just for 10, 20, 30 billion euros to get through the next year. How do you size up the prospects for rebuilding Ukraine with this kind of massive sum?
Well, it is true that in Lugano, the conference we had in July, the Ukrainian authorities presented a recovery plan for $750 billion. But it's also true that, for instance, the World Bank later on in the year sized that recovery up to $350 billion. To be very frank, I would rather focus on what is needed in the country and to sustain the real economy for the next 12 to 18 months. And then we will see what actually is going to be the size of the recovery of the economy over the next 10 years.
At the same time, you are a redevelopment, a reconstruction bank. One of your main goals is to foster market-oriented economies.
Is a short-term issue.
I'm sorry. I missed that.
I was saying that is a short-term issue. Is a 12-month issue. And this is where I think the international community should focus on.
And what success are they having with this right now? If we move on from reconstruction, if we move over and we look at that funding gap, we saw that there was a donor conference in France recently. Is that money coming? Are we seeing the help that Ukraine needs right now?
Well, I think the international community is actually mobilizing, and it's mobilizing quite fast. If I can speak about what we do at ABRD, we don't do budget financing. We are not set up to do budget financing, but we are set up to support the real economy, and in particular, the private sector. And And the way we approach this is along 5 priority lines, which is supporting trade, supporting energy security, supporting vital infrastructure, supporting food security, and in general, the private sector resilience. And typically in Ukraine, we invest around 1 billion euro per year. At the outset of the crisis, we pledged to support Ukraine with 3 billion euros over the next 2 years, in 2022, actually in 2023. And we, in 2022, we are past the 1.5 billion euros of investments along those 5 priorities, and in particular on energy security, which is, as we know, is of extreme relevance at the moment, being as the energy infrastructure is being shelled by the Russian Federation.
Ukraine is seeing its industrial base pretty much destroyed right now. When it comes out of this war, at some point, it's going to have an economy that can function, that can pay off some of its debts. How challenging will that be for nations?
Will be very challenging because and we will need the support of the private sector to do that. Whatever the size of the recovery in the long term, that cannot be put on the shoulders of international donors only. The private sector will need.
Okay. I'm afraid we'll have to end it there. I think we just lost our connection with Mr. Petroni. Again, that was Matteo Petroni with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I apologize for the technical issues there. We'll move on now to some of the other global business stories making headlines. Germany is burning coal at the fastest pace in at least 6 years. That's according to a new Bloomberg report. Levels of pollution from Germany's power production are now comparable to India and South Africa. The country has turned to other fossil fuels in a bid to replace Russian gas. FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried arrived in the U.S. Wednesday after being extradited from the Bahamas. The U.S. Department of Justice filed charges against the 30-year-old and accused him of being behind one of the biggest financial frauds in American history by misappropriating billions of dollars. Bankman-Fried also faces civil charges. That's it for me and the business team here in Berlin. You can find out more online. Check us out at dw.com/business. Thanks for watching.